Hello, this is Al Fry, and in this presentation you're going to learn the secrets of soulmate relationships and how any relationship can be improved. You'll not find this depth of information on soulmates in any bookstore texts or mystery school courses. Listen carefully then and contact us if you require further study material on this subject, because this is only one of many incredible inquiry presentations and publications. To understand exactly what soulmates are and how we can attract the correct soulmate into our lives requires us to go beyond the usual shallow understanding of this subject. For years now, the term soulmate has conjured up pictures of a perfect love that'll provide all our emotional fulfillments automatically. And unfortunately, this just isn't the way it is, or the truth. In the first place, we humans all have many counterparts, or soulmates, on this planet. Our Creator certainly wouldn't handicap us with only one chance to gain this fulfillment that we all dream of in a partnership. What would happen to our dreams if a single soulmate were married or died early? No, each of us has many chances at finding a soulmate. And in this presentation, you're going to learn the secrets of all this. A second reality problem is in thinking a soulmate will have many things in common with us, or will somehow make the relationship work out regardless of the hindrances. What a soulmate will provide is an inner, fulfilling contentment in our relationships. If we can grant our partner the right to be different, we'll find continued joy in these relationships, and the usual emotional weakening or walls will seldom interfere with the sparkle and emotional commitments found with soulmates. Well, why all of this is true requires that we go beyond the usual concepts and find the foundations of who we really are way back in the distant past. We humans are far more than just a brain and body and soul. Virtually all humans have at least 3 mind components, and some of us have even more of these non-physical components, which help shape our personalities. Well, it was long ago in what the Hebrews referred to as the Garden of Eden that 2 of these non-brain components were activated. When our species ate of the fruit of knowledge, there was far more involved than listening to a serpent biting on an apple and getting thrown out of the lush jungle environment. And in our other presentation on the Hidden Bible, we go into where such stories actually originated and why they were presented. Yet here, it's enough to understand that there were once very high-level overseers on the planet who tampered with the genetic stock of Homo sapien. The Hebrews, of course, said that Satan tempted Eve, and from a childlike, simple perspective, this was somewhat truthful. What actually seemed to have happened was that a group of godlike beings who were exiled here decided to mate with the earth women. Well, this experiment originally felt to be a way to upgrade our species, but unfortunately the experiment backfired, and instead of going along in pleasure on simple instinct alone, like all of the other animal species, suddenly our species had the horrors of an intelligence and constant choice. No longer could we instinctively know what foods or actions were in the best interests of our body. No longer were we satisfied with eating the simple, coarse foods of the jungle and nature. And suddenly we had a totally alien knowledge thrust on us. A knowledge that knew very little about what our body needed in its way of life and enjoyment here. As we ate of this fruit of knowledge, which incidentally had nothing to do with an apple if you go back to the original interpretations, our species suddenly was confused, and it had to learn things the hard way through heartbreaking experience. It now took careful parental guidance to keep us from poisoning ourselves for the first few years as we were taught. Other animal babies had instinct from birth, and our children with their new mind circuits were different. And today we're still working by the sweat of our brow outside the Edenic perfection of our ancient ancestors. Well, the alien contaminating mind that surfaced in the new crossbreed race at this time was always unsatisfied with things the way they were in the animal kingdom. And the offspring who'd carried this new mind were alert and creative enough to be favored by the gods of that time. They were often put to work overseeing the kingdoms of that period, and the Egyptians called this hybrid race the humans, or gentlemen, to differentiate them from the ordinary men of that time, who served under the first ruler god, King Menes of Egypt. It was always these hybrid gentlemen who were entrusted with keeping all of the day-to-day records in such early empires as Egypt, and later the term degenerated to denote all of our species. Well, what we call the priority-seeking mind that resulted from the mating between gods and men was constantly feeding experience into the memory banks of the non-material part of our man species. It was this soul knowledge gathering that eventually gave us a high intelligence potential and the ability to work with technology, because each time our body died, the memory tapes would be available to the soul while in the next body. For persons who could relax and listen to their soul knowledge then, a human with hundreds of lives of memory tapes could be brilliant in many areas. Somewhat later, persons like Jesus Christ and many other spiritual leaders of miracle-working ability showed that any human could do remarkable things by tapping into this knowledge of the inner soul. The one hindrance was that the soul had the free choice of the Creator as its guideline and would not help persons who were unethical or did unethical things. And since the new mind or alien component was from a dominion or domination system origin, or Satan as the Hebrews recognized it, there was constant conflict in the human. And each of their actions required that they choose between actions of dominion or domination and of the golden rule and choice. And since the non-material thoughts flowing into the brain from one component or mind was picked up by the brain the same as any other, there was no guide or difference to help humans choose their way of choice. And because of these ethics problems, what happened was that there were automatic laws at work, which brought back deliberate acts of domination against the originators of these domination acts. This karma, as some philosophies and teachers called it, ensured that humans got a taste of their own medicine. And if free choice laws were violated by stealing or hurting, The person who did the stealing or hurting was eventually paid back with the same types of acts. And this action allowed the soul's memory banks to know what being hurt felt like. That it was not a pleasure and definitely not the right thing to do to other people. And ideally, this action allowed a person to know inwardly what was right and wrong. A person who had a chance to steal, cheat, lie, or hurt for some sort of gain would instantly get a couple of conflicting thoughts running through their brain circuits. And if they were alert enough, they could recognize that the self-serving thoughts of using and abusing a fellow human were priority mind motivated, and in a split second, they'd have the soul-oriented thoughts of that's wrong or unethical to contend with. How they chose to act, of course, decided their future circumstances. Humans constantly thought that they were in bad, stressful situations from bad luck. Now, the truth, of course, was that they eventually had to learn the golden rule. Granting others choice was the only way, the only workable system that worked over the long haul. Well, many humans gave lip service to freedom, of course, but actually knew nothing of the principle. They wanted a freedom to dominate others, and they still had very little self-control. On a larger scale, they'd dominate just as many people as they could in society, or on a smaller scale, they'd dirty a dish or bar a tool and fail to realize that someone else would have to take their responsibility for cleaning the dish or getting another tool if it weren't returned. And people with these lessons to learn in the cruel world outside Eden usually wanted others to take their responsibilities. Well, governments, leaders, gurus, priests, just any with something for nothing or big reward promises would do, as long as it would ease this self-responsibility. Well, most of the great spiritual leaders of the world knew better, and they pointed out better ways. Most of them said that the way to a superhuman ability and perfection was to know thyself, and listen to yourself inwardly, and then act on what you knew inwardly was right, forgetting what the many domination systems were selling as an answer. To understand where soulmates came from, we need another perspective foundation. As the non-material mind components came into this material world, there's an automatic phenomena that occurs. The single, sexless mind component must split into two parts to exist in this carbon-based material system here. The male and female, or positive and negative polarity, is required so that reproduction in this material world can take place. And this is a very important point here, because it means that for every component that you have, there must be the other half or other polarity portion somewhere on the planet. And occasionally, of course, one of these components gets taken out prematurely as a host body dies. And yet at any one time, there are virtually dozens of true soulmates available for any human intelligent enough to bring them into their circle of life or an environment. And since we're all a mixture of many components in a physical housing or body, the next problem crops up as we need to know just what soulmate to order. Many of us in society or the rat race are running most of the time on a mind circuit that's mostly interested in gaining money, fame, or material things. And if you call in a soulmate that's working for the most part on a different mind level, you'll have very little in common, except the great physical and mental attraction. Now, this could cause you both a lot of unnecessary anguish. If your soulmate is interested in little else beyond frivolity or art and beauty, why should you drag them into your life, where they'll be blocked from their physical or cultural fulfillment? Especially when, with just a little more knowledge and discernment, you could order a soulmate that is more in line with your own personality. And in the modern human comprehension texts, which were put out in the mid-70s by A.B. Glazier, there are detailed descriptions of most of these mind components that we're speaking of here. The original alien priority mind that altered the circuitry of the man brain was of only one polarity, and this required the automatic introduction of another opposite mind, which even worked on an entirely different energy system. Even today, what we know as the acupuncture meridians are known to exist on unmeasurable energy flow circuits. And yet there's still a paradox to scientists. What each mind is good at and strives toward then is important. You'll probably be happiest with someone of a similar mind dwell. And if you dwell in a priority mind dwell 80% of the time, it'll probably be well to find someone with the same priority goals as yours. So you could play your little priority mind games with them and work toward the same material objectives. And if, on the other hand, you're finally maturing and ready to take on more self-responsibility, you could be ready for a soulmate of better balance, or one that uses several mind moods in balance. If you're a man seeking a woman, you can forget about looks. You're going to be hopefully concerned more with personality, and this has little to do with physical looks. Because if you get a true soulmate, you're going to probably delight in her company no matter what she looks like. As the tie gets stronger, she'll probably come to look beautiful regardless of first impressions. Well, women are not so usually concerned about appearance. Many are concerned about financial solidity and loyalty, though. And knowing what soulmate to order may not bring a tycoon into your life, but very few tycoons will bring on an emotional satisfaction. And your soulmate will, if you choose correctly. In Glazier's comprehension text, there's a clear description of priority-minded people. Their thought patterns are of self-seeking ends with little regard for emotional weaknesses and frivolity. And if you are wrapped up in business and striving constantly, you're probably working on the priority mental level most of the time. If you're deep into the betterment of humanity and trying to uplift your fellow human beings through the arts and emotional fulfillment, you're probably working on the humanitarian drives of the opposite mind. And in this particular frequency level, the intuition is usually good. Creativity comes easily, but with not much emphasis on material things, there can be financial problems. Most of humanity around you will be dwelling in a mind mode or frequency that keeps them unconcerned about either of the general humanitarian outlooks and goals we just mentioned. Well, they usually don't become a slave to work-oriented goals either. And this third mind is more like the original animal brain level, and it's more concerned about having simple fun and relaxing. And people in this particular mind dwell will work and enjoy beauty, but will seldom get all serious about it and worry much about it tomorrow. They can usually get caught up in credit traps and kept on a workforce like slaves if they get to watch their TV and ride around in time payment cars enough in between times. Very few are interested in presentations like this, which are serious and have heavier responsibility to them. Well, since most persons will get a little heavier influx of thoughts in one of these particular mind frames that we just mentioned, it's usually pretty safe to assume that their soul tapes, so to speak, are a little unbalanced in one of these three directions. Now, to figure out what you want, you only need to categorize yourself and then mentally order up the soulmate or mind type that fits your needs. Now, most persons viewing this will be of priority mind level because it's the priority mind that's curious and wishes to gain more knowledge and efficiency. And if you mentally order another priority-minded person or soulmate in your life, you'll be asking for someone similar to yourself. Well, you may or you may not like this situation. How would you like to live with yourself a while? Well, it could seldom be dull. Be a constant game of who's going to get this or win that. And if you can take and enjoy constant mind games, fine. If not, though, think about your other choices. Now, if you order your humanitarian or beauty-minded soulmate, they may idolize or be fascinated with you, but will seldom take your goals seriously. You'll simply be a mate that puts emotions and beauty above material things. And if you appreciate this in them, you'll have a gem. Well, the basic-minded people of the world will be found listening to sad songs and drinking beer with barroom friends and going to church and generally bantering around with few goals or intellectual pursuits. They're usually simple and fun to be with, but they seldom have deep and abiding loyalties, and like a grasshopper, they may just hop away if you can't have fun together. And if you can do without competition, mind games, or complications, these basic-minded mates are great. Well, of course, the next step after figuring out where your head is and what kind of soulmate you basically want is to put your mental order in. And I say mental order because that's just what a prayer or mental request is. It's a continual thought picture, repeated thought picture, and mental request from your minds for your soul to help you get what you strongly desire or envision. Well, the natives of the world, like the Hawaiians, often knew a great deal more about putting in mental orders than we civilized people, so-called. They often laughed in wonderment at the missionaries who prayed, because they knew that the empty words with no emotions would never bring results for these ignorant missionaries. Well, the natives would relax and carefully construct these mental pictures of what they desired. Repetition of this with reasonably emotional moods got through to the soul, and it got action. And being in the timeless, non-material dimension, the soul could go out and locate the thing desired. If it was a soulmate, it was very simple for the soulmate to find the one ordered. The real trick here was getting across to the soul the exact specifications, because just putting out a non-specific mental order for a soulmate would usually bring disappointment or disaster. You could get virtually any one of a dozen combinations, and they could be in almost any situation, from married with 6 kids to alcoholics or drug addicts. Usually a little more sensible to ask your soul to find a soulmate carrying a particular mind fragment of your soul and a certain lifestyle criteria, one who's not burdened down with too many responsibility or weaknesses. Now, this can take quite a long listing, or it can be short and sweet. Now, the longer the requirement list, the longer it will usually take your soul to arrange for you to both meet accidentally or bump into one another. But if it's too short, you may later need to put in another order after writing off what you got. You can put in your order as though you were feeding data into a computer. Don't leave room for guesswork if you insist on details later. Now, give you a little example of what I mean. I had an acquaintance that once put a quick mental order in for someone to love and to reciprocate with this love. It was after a hurtful breakup. And the order was filled in days when a close relation put a little 1-year-old baby in her arms. And the order was filled to the letter, but it was not what her mind had in mind at the time of the request. And if you think about it a little, you'll find that actually many of our mental pictures are eventually brought to reality. Very few people remember putting in the order, and the orders were so weak that it took considerable time to bring the orders to fruition. To get the results you want, then, don't just put out some little hasty little wishes on the spur of the moment. Consider the consequences of what you order, and use discretion. King Midas and the Golden Touch is a typical of stories which try to get this point across. The point here that we're trying to make is that priority mind wishes often backfire later and seldom give long-range happiness. And that cute little goddess or handsome Prince Charming is often spoiled, demanding tyrants, and they could chain you to a life of misery, toil, or worse. What some knowing persons do is write down a list of attributes that they're looking for, starting off with the type of soul fragment they want. They continue to exclude faults like alcoholism or burdens like a large number of children or excessive responsibility. And some persons have had good results from simply putting in an order for a person or soulmate that would create a mutually pleasurable relationship, and then just let it go at that. And keep in mind that the soul does know what the results of a union can be if this wide spectrum order is put in. And what you get may be totally unlike what you expected, but the results can be satisfying and better than using mind discernment in many cases. Persons who write books about soulmates usually have little knowledge of the wide range of possibilities. They'll desire a partner or soulmate after daydreaming about it, or daydreaming about the partner to come, and then assume that the person who enters their life is their only, one and only, true soulmate. And sometimes it is one soulmate, other times it's a close past friend, and a mate from prior times in a former relationship. Now, some writers advocate bringing across a picture of the dream man or dream girl desired before the actual meeting. And this is even possible if continual strong invocations or orders are put in. The soul can bring selections through in dreams or mind thought forms. Well, as the eventual meeting takes place, you may recognize the mate as a soulmate, but never expect that they will recognize you. You will have many things in your knowledge banks that are going to be exactly opposite to your soulmate, and this includes a total lack of awareness of being a soulmate. Only one of you will ever recognize the other as a soulmate inwardly. And this is due to this polarity balance that we mentioned before. Well, many persons that I've met who found one of their other halves have found them interested in and knowledgeable about totally opposite things in life. And this, of course, will depend to some extent on the dominant mind actions involved. Well, A.B. Glazier, the founder of the Modern Humans, who we mentioned, met and rejected his priority-minded soulmate, and he explained that while his vibes were incredibly exciting, it became exhausting over the long run. Now, Glazier opted for one of her more placid, brain-oriented soulmates, and in his texts he covers the exact attributes of this in such a situation. And while he possessed the knowledges of human function and such, his soulmate possessed little of this knowledge or even an interest in it. Writers on the subject, then, who tell of meeting their soulmate with the same interests as themselves, are usually only meeting up with former partners and persons that they've had close bonds with before. Now, such unions are great, but still lack the total feeling of contentment with the bond that a true soulmate union gives. And because soulmates are often so contented in their union, it seldom happens that souls will deliberately get their soulmates together. Most persons need more conflict and problems to learn by, and soulmates usually don't get so caught up in the usual rat race and conflicts. And since it's through such learning that the minds become balanced and the soul regains its perfection, your soul is usually the cause of your setting and seeking a rest with your soulmate once in a while, every few lives. And since you have an interest in this subject, it's an indication that you may just be ready for a little reprieve in this chaos on this planet. A little reprieve with your soulmate. Now, technically, soulmates are within a few years of being the same age, but they may be born quite a distance from each other, because in the split seconds of the interdimensional change, there can be months and miles of difference when coming into this physical world. When you put in your mental order for a soulmate, your soul can slip out over to another area to seek out and converse with your potential mate. And it's often felt that you can benefit from getting together, then they'll get you together. And they'll set it up just like it's chance meetings. And if it looks like there's an impending disaster coming up to the soul, you'll get an inner cease and desist feeling if you ask for the soul's feedback. In other words, your mental order may have been very specific and asked for a priority mind soulmate, when this specific union would stir your life into chaos. It's probably best that you put a clause in your little order, clause about a mate that would benefit your learning and advancement spiritually. You probably don't really want to be taking time out for secondary goal at times as important as the present cycle on this planet, this end cycle time. If the particular priority mind soulmate you ask for is a black arts practitioner, for example, or someone as stimulating as Delilah, as seen here, you could have a tiger by the tail. You probably got better things to do this cycle end time. Now, most soulmates can squabble with each other like any other mates. The difference is that they're inwardly satisfied with each other and feel content in the other mate's presence. Love and loyalty are automatic, And in a world where emotions are shallow and gain motivations are back of most unions and relationships, this automatically loyalty relationship is rare and priceless. Well, as you can probably guess, there are very few persons ready for their soulmates now. They need more time in the merry-go-round of sensations and earthly experience. They're still unbalanced, driven by their excitement, sensation-seeking priority minds. Well, as we humans develop spiritually, it's an indication that our souls have begun to get a mind balance and equilibrium. After hundreds of lives in futile striving for material things and excitement, we begin to find that it's a little simpler, and the little simpler emotional things like affection that brings on lasting pleasure. Now, since our mind components each use and puts out energy, when we start calling on these little used components, it ups the overall body wattage, electricity, and efficiency. Now, a brain-oriented mind may put out 7 watts of energy a day. And when this is tripled by adding the wattage of 2 more components, a tremendous energy flows through these brain circuits. And by focusing some of the photon energy through exacting mental imagery, miracles can take place. The body can focus this photon energy through crystalline reflective agents in the blood, reflect them to distant points, and alter non-material atoms into material atoms. This means that persons who start to gain mind balance and spiritually can put mental orders in and in an exacting way can get results in a very short time. Instead of weeks, it may cut down this fulfillment time to days, hours, or even seconds. Now, this is a subject that we cover elsewhere, but it'll give you an idea of why we're advocating you to carefully choose your goals and actions at this time. The time and stakes are open now are precious. Now, in my own experience, I've put in mental orders in a rash way and had shocking results that bordered on undue influence or the black arts. One morning, for example, I asked for a girl who shared an interest in a particular area, and in a few hours I was moved by impulse to go down to the local store and move down the road on this errand. Well, a stranded girl by the road filled my order completely, and her car started working perfectly once I arrived on the scene. Unfortunately, I had neglected to fill in more important details in my order. Their lifestyles were just too different for any lasting relationship. Now, over and over, these poor orders get poor results. When one uses their power of visualization for selfish or dominating ends, it brings on even more trouble. Karmic feedback causes us to experience the same domination or unethical actions as we've given out. And at the present time, this retribution feedback happens very quickly. And you can see it plainly working in your own life or in your slightly unethical acquaintances' lives, if you take an interest in this subject. Better that you watch your motivations and orders carefully then, because who knows who'll show up your door if your orders are sloppy. And what if you get a showmate showing up as ordered who's already married? Are you ready to shake up their life for your own whimsical order or desire? Well, at this point, you may be recalling persons who are constantly in a turmoil from their premature and half-thought-out mental orders. And when you think a little more deeply about all of this, you'll see that it's a good thing the majority of persons don't have a fast or instant creative power fulfillment. Our world would be in chaos. And actually, that's one of the things we're going through this schooling on Earth for. Because a few persons will learn eventually this self-control to the point that they'll be able to handle instant mind-over-matter ability. They will have lost or controlled their bad temper or actions and no longer need to stumble along in this classroom on this planet. And dozens of examples of miracle workers are found across our globe at any one time. And all of them who continue are spiritually stable and make sure that they don't use their abilities for domination. Now, many books, magazines, and even other presentations of ours cover this subject in greater depth. Now, one of the abilities that most healers and miracle workers have is the ability to concentrate and hold a sharp image in their minds over a longer period of time than most persons. Few persons can relax and hold a strong thought for more than a few seconds. A strong mental desire and picture are part of the ask and ye shall receive given procedure. And you can get results easily by daily holding a strong prayer thought of what you wish for a half minute or so each day. Know that the desire will form into a reality, and then it will, if it's within reason. Now, there are limitations. With the laws of choice running the higher systems, you can't lawfully whammy a specific mate, for example. But you can bring in a type of soulmate that you wish. Depending on circumstances, you'll suddenly bump into your soulmate if your projections or prayers are persistent and strong enough. Many persons lack the confidence that they or their soul can do such things. But virtually all persons are protected and aided constantly by their souls. Persons would usually never get beyond infancy unless they got constant protection from their soul. You're constantly aided in survival with intuition about what to do and what not to do. We're almost half blind without this soul aid. With thousands of years of experience, your soul knows a lot more about protecting and aiding the body than any of the separate minds. Your priority mind is constantly sending opposing thoughts and thinking which counters the soul's promptings. And this is again the choice game that goes on constantly in your life. Now, to understand how many soulmate combinations are available to us, all we might use is this analogy of a tree. Tree with at least 3 large limbs branching off from the trunk. And a priority branch, for example, will have its own 3-mind polarity opponent. And each of these branches could represent minds that are split off in polarity from us at different levels. Now, with each trunk branching off, it'll give us an astounding potential of over 80 soulmates to be happy with here on Earth. And even with many of these soulmates written off because of commitments and problems and unavailability, still leaves dozens of potential combinations. And keep in mind that your soul's only too happy to locate one or more soulmates for you if you desire, and you make the effort. Well, most persons obviously ignore the inward guidance that would bring such happiness, and they follow the shallow whims of their minds, and they mate with persons that they casually bump into in life. After a number of years, there's often very little joy left in these relationships. And the persons just stay together and tolerate each other for companionship. Well, it's easy to visualize that a soulmate won't fulfill all of our needs. And if you or your soul represents a tree trunk, there's going to be distant branches in this analogy that'll only furnish one polarity fragment of your components. But regardless, this will give you an inward fulfillment that you'll not get from any ordinary relationship. Your major concern should probably center around which mind component fragments that you wish to mentally attract. Now, this problem of which type of soulmate that you ought to attract can be a challenge to your mind and your thinking. If, for example, you were the oldest daughter of younger brothers and a sun sign of bold, forward Aries, you'd probably be playing with fire if you ordered your priority mind soulmate. With such a strong-willed man, there may simply be too much friction from the contest of wills. You may be better off with a more placid mate of the brain or beauty mind background. Now, each order or case would depend on such discernment, or these various variables, or as we pointed out before, depend on the discernment of your soul if you want to ask it to do the choosing. Now, as you're probably suspecting, finding and keeping a non-soulmate love in your life is not so very different than in handling a soulmate situation. In most cases, we're surrounded with acquaintances and loves that we're drawn to from past associations. Well, ages ago, we started cycles with others that we never got to complete, and we now must often work out the differences and learn through the exchange of emotions. And some of these situations are a pleasure to work out, and others will put a strain on our nerves. But if ethics and higher principles are used, usually all will be well in the end in any of these situations. And if the partner or acquaintance uses domination tactics against us, we should strike back in lawful defense to fill in this learning experience for them. And for example, if you run across a bully who continually finds it easy to get their way over you or use force against other persons, you owe it to them to strike back in defense and allow them to learn that they're dominating and using other persons. And as long as you strike back in defense and not revenge, you're perfectly within spiritual or choice laws. And this is a subject that we cover elsewhere in more depth. And because of our past ties with former souls, we'll often automatically feel a close bond with persons who we occasionally bump into. And sometimes it's the exact opposite, I might add. And this will often lead to living in a close relationship to such persons to work out these past antagonisms or unfulfilled emotions. Well, such cycles can be worked out quickly in most cases. I once met a little blonde at a New Year's party that felt kindred and close, and after a week or so we were in bed one morning relaxing, and she recalled that I had once met her on my way through in one of the crusades. At that time, she was a little blonde serf's daughter, and I told her that I'd someday return to her. And the cycle had been started then, and now it had come full circle again. Without enough in common to continue into a deeper permanent relationship, we later parted as friends, and the cycle ended. Well, many of us today have parents and children and friends that are close or antagonistic from events started long ago. And this is the way our soul adds to its experience and learning tapes. So if you're in a situation that seems intolerable, just remember that it's very likely that you're in the situation to learn. And if you use your imagination and self-control, you can probably leave the situation behind in short order. Now, you don't just walk out, of course. You think about why you're in the situation and ask your soul to aid you with answers. And you may need to ask over and over for these answers. Now, your soul may continually give you thoughts and answers in return, and your priority mind may continually reject such thoughts as nonsense or of no importance. Now, perhaps you might get your answers by picking up a random book and seeing the answer in some paragraph you run across. However the answer comes, you will get it if you're persistent. And if you must learn humility or patience in the relationships, speed up the process if you want out. Don't just fight back in frustration or anger. Ask for soul aid in learning your lesson so that you can go on to better circumstances. Well, things may seem to be in a mess, or the problems or situations insurmountable. Yet once you learn your lesson, you can go on to other things, and the situations will dissolve. Well, the priority mind will often scheme about how to get out of a bad relationship through unethical actions. And if you use domination principles and unethical moves to get out of your learning experience, you'll seldom be free for long. You'll probably be right back in a similar situation before long. And we can see this in other persons constantly. The alcoholic's wife goes out and finds another alcoholic to continue the punishment or learning. It's a good example. Well, the soul knows what you require and can get you what you order if you're ready. And since you're viewing this information, you're very likely ready for it and taking control of your life slowly yourself. And if some of these concepts seem a little hard to understand, ask your soul to furnish you with more data. Help this action along by visiting the metaphysical section of your library or speaking with persons who have interests in these areas. Now, to understand how to keep your soulmate or lover, remember that your Creator set up everything under choice laws. And true love will thrive and persist only such choice laws backing them. Domination is a good way to ruin long-term relationships. And with the opposition or domination systems ruling most of our planet today and its laws and mores and beliefs, it's a little wonder that our usual partnerships crumble so quickly in today's civilized world. People today have the impression that they can take and use without exchanging or giving back. This is insanity. Well, telling others what to do and dominating them will bring resentment. And it's resentment that kills love and wrecks relationships. A person's souls desires the body to be free. And as few as half a dozen no's in a life can wreck a relationship For example, if your partner enjoys something that you don't and you forbid them their choice in this enjoyment, this is domination. And if you keep up the nose, your mate will grow to resent you and the relationship. So as long as your mate's actions and enjoyments don't hurt or affect yours, let them alone to enjoy themselves or share the enjoyment with them. Such foundation points are simple, but they're often overlooked in today's chaotic world. And since our Creator made all of us with different likes and dislikes and abilities, it will seldom happen that you'll find anyone who shares over a few similar enjoyments. And what we can do to aid relationships is to enjoy what we do have in common and forget about pushing the relationship into other areas. You'll enjoy different friends for different enjoyments. And actually, there are literally hundreds of low-cost or free pleasures that most persons have in common. Today, we're so brainwashed into following the molded, money-oriented pursuits that few of us will go back to the more natural and simple pleasures. And what we can do to aid relationships is to enjoy what we do have in common and forget about this pushing constantly. Soulmates often can enjoy simpler pursuits because they enjoy being around each other so much. Many persons get bored in each other's company if they go beyond similar interests, and soulmates usually enjoy each other's company regardless of what they're doing together. And as you probably noticed, children are usually better at having cheap fun and enjoying themselves. To keep yourself young at heart and a better partner in relationships, notice what children do and try to be a little more childlike. Does that ring a bell? Well, because animals don't have to worry or contend with choice, animals must be tied to instinct and cycle laws, the cyclic laws of nature. Well, unlike humans, animals are caught up in natural rhythms and actions that force them into certain natural actions. And they sleep, mate, and migrate according to the cycles of the sun, moon, and other planetary influences and cycles of nature. So while our human, non-material minds are not affected by such cycles, our animal bodies are. And in a relationship with other humans, then, there's a certain degree of influence which is tied in with these cycles. The so-called natal influence of astrology is probably the most useful thing to know about in aiding a relationship. So if you find out your mate's birthday, you can go to one of the simple sun sign astrological books and get a little better understanding of why your mate acts the way they do. And this can help you to balance the relationship. So briefly touched on, the outline would go something like this. The astrological natal sign of Aries, sun sign, are usually driving hard in original directions of their own. And they don't usually tolerate much suppression or continued rejection. They often get along well with Leos, who can reciprocate in the emotional department, and Taurians, who can provide sexual fulfillment emotionally. And so-called Taurus persons are tied to a desire for home, beauty, and sexual depth. And Aquarians, Virgos, and Capricorns often fill the bill for partnerships. Well, Geminis need mental variety and stimulation. And Virgos, Libras, and Aquarians often fill the bill and can feed their minds with less need for warmth and sex continually. Well, Cancer, or moon children, is a water sign. And they are often emotionally up and down, with strong holds on Capricorns or other signs who understand their moody ways. And Leos prefer attention and adulation. Scorpios, Cancers, and other warmer partners will often fill the bill here emotionally. Well, Virgos often need a wide mental field to explore, and Taurus, Capricorn, Scorpio, Cancer, and others who give them leeway are compatible. Libras are often romantics who need the adventures of love. It can be from Geminis, Aries, Leos, and others who are enthusiastic and not too emotional. Scorpios usually require physical and emotional love in abundance to fill their needs. Virgos, Cancers, Pisces, Taurus, Capricorns, and others can sometimes fill the bill. Now, Sagittarius people usually think too much when they're younger and allow independence to stifle their emotions and potentials. Sometimes it works out with Leos, Aries, and others who are able to grant them the great freedom that they need to share their emotions. And Capricorns often get caught up in materialistic goals, but Virgos, Taurus, and water signs can often soften their walls a little and bring out the emotions enough for their fulfillment. Aquarians usually have good emotional partnerships with persons who will simply go along with their worldly aims and ways without getting jealous or domineering. Pisces tend to be dreamy, emotional, volatile, sensitive types who need partners who will share their sensitivity and tolerate their moods. This can sometimes include Cancer, Scorpio, Sagittarius. So by understanding the many influences that affect us and our mates can give us a little better tolerance of what may look like shortcomings to us. And in the case of astrological natal influences, we can realize that our Leo mate, for example, should be adulated and complimented now and then if they're going to remain happy with us. And if our moody Pisces or Cancer mates seem a bit too much at times, we can realize that it's a lot easier just to shut our mouths than to wrangle them. This is why granting others freedom and choice tends to neutralize most of the hostility. It allows for the differences in we humans. Now, there are dozens of environmental influences and other physical differences that affect how we humans act and think. And knowing about these things can be helpful, but it's not really necessary if you can grant choice to all other persons. Well, total freedom for your mate is actually the love that most persons are looking for. And few persons have the self-control for this and get involved in possessive excitement games of the mind, which of course sooner or later leads to disaster. And oddly enough, many split-ups occur over small things, like continual resentments, and a carryover of former resentments from earlier relationships. Now, couples seldom realize they are only half of a whole polarity and need to be together and support each other to be fulfilled. Well, today, in civilization, there are many outside pressures on relationships. And as the dominion or domination systems have gained more control of industry and wages recently, they've forced women into the job market. And this has created chaos with family life. And women have often blamed men for chaotic world conditions, but have often shirked their responsibility. They've taken the paths of least resistance. And the majority have wanted their men to take the responsibilities and make the decisions. Even freer thinking women will often turn to a man when any crisis comes along. Well, part of the problem here is that women's role is in creating life, and man's is in protecting life. Men are realists who need time to pursue their work and their projects. And women, on the other hand, often live in some degree of fantasy. They're not happy unless they're needed by their mates. And women who do not get their mate's full attention are not secure and emotionally content, usually. To overcome many of these differences and come to understanding takes communication. And women often fail in such communication because they assume men know the situation already. And women are also prone to talk about sex when they're not emotionally stirred up. Men then get confused and start assumptions. And only plain, honest expression or talking will often get all this confusion unraveled. To keep a mate, then, requires that you put some of these foundation points to work toward keeping a happy union. And first and foremost duty of a man is to show constant consideration and attention to a woman mate. Well, most women can forgive many shortcomings in a man if she gets enough affection. And if she gets fat, slovenly, or boring to a man, though, she may be creating her own problems from her lack of self-control. Now, either mate can sometimes start domination tactics which will kill the affection eventually. Jealous persons have this problem when their mind-implanted emotions come and it ruins a relationship. And this is from a lack of self-esteem and stupidity often. And sexual indifference can come from a bad relationship block or just poor health. And all of these situations, of course, can be straightened out if some honest communication comes to the rescue. And as long as it's not to the point of hurting another, honesty is always by far the best policy in the long run. All too many people in today's society live in a world of facade. And if a mate is kind-hearted, the partner's a fool for leaving them for small imperfections of character. And singles are usually lonely and a little lost, even with a career and money. Once married, the freedom should always be granted from the start. No obligations or rules should be pointed out or necessary. The mutual intent of the union should be automatic and based on choice. So let's get together instead of a constant "you must do that" attitude. And some of the little things that make the bond and love better are showing continual interest and small gestures of appreciation. Be honest in your likes and dislikes about their habits, and don't dwell on your mate's faults once they're pointed out or recognized. Try to satisfy your mate's sexual desires and sleep with them. Don't exploit or use your mate or force them to be your puppet or slave. And since some mates are a little slovenly, it's helpful to be there with a toothbrush or soap or whatever it takes at the appropriate time. Training by helpfulness is different than harassing them. Women can wield a great deal of control over men if they'll simply use their brains, build up their male's ego. Men work much of their lives away for women who can captivate and spoil them a little now and then. What could be simpler? Now, there are 100 different situations where a marriage can blow up from a little lack of consideration. And sometimes all it takes is a little thinking about the situation. A perfect example is in infidelity. Men were designed to mate with many women. So if a man cheats, it's seldom serious. He simply gets an opportunity and acts out what his role is, or what his body wants. And this is seldom a problem in close relationships. It does not usually affect the affection and closeness in any relationship. Well, another little understood point in a relationship is that there should be honesty in sharing things, and making love or pursuing a pastime should be fun for both partners. And if you put up false fronts and facades, it can eventually backfire. In making love, for example, you can show your emotions honestly. It will usually turn on the energy buttons of your partner. Otherwise, the actions eventually become boring and the vibes get cut off. Well, because men must be turned on or aroused before they can even make love, men can't fake arousal. And women, on the other hand, can and do occasionally fake an interest during lovemaking. And if the motivations are temporarily to please their man, this is one thing. But over the long haul, this can be disaster to a marriage or a relationship. And while on this subject, we might recommend that you get a little paperback on sexual astrology. It'll help you understand why your Gemini is less prone to get as excited about sex as your Scorpio. And such little paperback books can't fit everyone into handy little niches, but they'll often clear up many puzzling generalities for you. Well, sometimes persons are tied to their mates, leave them frustrated and unfulfilled, and this may seem like a case of bad luck or poor choice, but it's usually a case of your needing a karmic lesson, as we pointed out before. And if you get it in your head that you'll just walk out on the situation and drop your responsibilities to find a better situation or soulmate, you may cause yourself a lot of problems in the end. Let the situation work out naturally. Figure out why you're in the situation with the person you're with and hurry the lesson up through understanding. You can then ask your soul to resolve the situation naturally and beneficially. And suddenly, if you've done everything correctly, your ties will come loose. Your present mate will also be free and find someone else. And both you and your mate will be free. And then you can order or be with a more compatible mate or soulmate that you've mentally ordered. Now, we dwell on this point over and over because persons who run away from obligations usually find themselves in similar situations again, as we keep pointing out. And until these lessons are learned, It's best to do things by your inner guidance, and only this inner knowingness will help you to recognize the details of these situations. But because there's so much ignorance among humans concerning sexuality and what's healthy and what's not healthy in sex, let's go into the foundation of this subject. As we can see around us, animals don't have sex just for the fun of it. When the females of the species come in heat, automatic sex drives go into function, and the animals mate. And both the male and the females feel an overpowering urge to find a mate and join, and there's no choice involved at all. If the scent and vibrations of the animals are not in line with what nature feels as the right species or genetic stock, the hormone smell simply won't attract the opposite mate. It's very simple and part of the Creator's perfect system. We humans are different. Our minds store up thought tapes of how good sex feels and wish to rerun an experience. For pleasure, and all the minds enjoy sex, and especially the body, which ordinarily has so few outlets for pleasure in this civilized life of ours. And what we have then is a situation that's ideal for keeping the human and all the components contented. But what we get is just the opposite usually, because after many years of being brainwashed with sex and sin fear, few persons really enjoy sex as much or as often as they should. Well, from the time that we're tots and children, we're scolded and reprimanded for having anything to do with our sex parts or sex in general. Mummies and daddies and religions damn sex, and many of us never get over this twisted, warped training that gets dumped on us. And this training of good equals bad has been kept alive for thousands of years by persons and power systems simply because they've tried to control all of our emotions. And workers work best if they're subjugated or controlled emotionally and mentally. And sex was long one of the emotional natures of our species that was difficult for the state and church to control. It was thousands of years ago that leaders thought up marriage so that they wouldn't need to bear the responsibility of so many bastard unclaimed children. Later, the church got in the act to maintain control. And if you think about it, I'm sure that you'll recognize that happy, content people usually aren't interested in going to church constantly. People looking for answers or fellow followers are doing so because they aren't fulfilled inwardly. They must still search outwardly. Well, so complete has the censorship been against pleasurable love and sex that there aren't very many words in the civilized languages to cover the subjects. Even the most primitive tribes, on the other hand, have a language that usually has far more words in them on these subjects. So think about it. Does conjugation and begetting and coitus sound like fun to you? Well, over the years, there were a number of persons who stuck their necks out and pointed most of this out. And many were quickly censored. And some, like Wilhelm Reich and others, occasionally died in prison on other charges. And it sort of makes you wonder, who's in the cage in civilization here? The animals or the humans? Well, the simple truth is that sex is the Creator's greatest gift to us. And it can be the closest thing to being turned into the Creator's flow of joy energies that's available here on this planet. Well, think about it. Animals just to get together a few minutes, they work out and then they leave each other. with no further memory or affection. And we humans, on the other hand, can keep these vibrates flowing for hours, day in and day out. When it's over, we even have the memory tapes to rerun the pleasure for us. Well, what gift to humanity could be any more beneficial than this? Over and over, doctors recognize sex as the perfect therapy for stress and emotional hang-ups and blocks. Well, for thinking persons who survive the domination system's brainwashing, sex is the most beautiful thing our species has, and that they can feel their bodies purr in contentment and pleasure. That wonderful joy energy slowly mounts and brings eventual fulfillment and relaxation. Body aches and pains and cares often just melt away as these energies blend. And women with lower back problems often wonder afterwards where these problems went. Men with lower groin aches get instant relief. And there's a joy and pleasure for hours after, a satisfying joining between male and female. Yeah, but this priority mind of ours has a tape that usually plays something in our head. It says something like, "That's a sin. Father Holy says it's not right." And "Mommy told me it was bad when you weren't married." And on these tapes play out of this priority mind of ours. Well, what we humans probably really should do then is examine our origins. And I could go on for hours on why such censorship and repression is ridiculous here, but only you can listen to your inner soul, yourself, and know if a situation is right or wrong. Generally speaking, any relationship you have that doesn't hurt the persons involved with is spiritually or ethically acceptable. Well, to enjoy sex, you need a healthy, virile male or mate who can unloosen their emotions, and one who will keep their mouths shut about it afterwards. And these qualifications, unfortunately, aren't too easy to find today. Well, in our present society, with unnatural warped sex polluting the picture, there's also the danger of exotic virus infections. AIDS, for example, created chaos in casual relationships in the 80s. It's because Mother Nature and the Creator worked out clever systems to ensure that only natural body function systems continue on this planet. Men are the opposite and correct polarity for women, and twisted mind-oriented acts to the contrary can lead to a stern lesson by Mother Nature. And sex, in all its purest glory, is simple. And it only requires that you blend your natural body instincts with a mental desire to please your partner. And when only selfish interests continue, it can eventually backfire sometimes. Start with holding emotions or playing mind games too long, and it can block the vibrations. The world is full of people today that have lost their vibes. They've stayed married long after these vibes are lost. And quite a few are miserable. But they stay together now for companionship or security. Well, this is a pretty pathetic picture. After any number of years, the vibes can just suddenly stop. The excuses start coming for avoiding sex. And if the vibes stop for you ever, start communicating fast. Think about the repressed problems that came up recently in the relationship and talk them out. And if these vibes or escape you once in a while, that's no big problem. But continually you got problems. Sometimes these vibes cut off, a little later encounter can bring back the magic. And if, after you caress and make emotional headway with your mate, body to body, and it still doesn't bring the sex vibes, you have a mental or a physical problem. Find out what little mental game is cutting off the chemicals here. And sometimes the problem's simple. It may be as simple as you're not thinking sex enough. Persons constantly think of jobs and homes and spending money, but very few are open-minded enough to think of what they want sexually and to keep these thoughts active. We get in a rut and often let our jobs and our lifestyles kill us and our emotions right off. Well, persons who have their emotions cut off or strangled don't make very good lovers. And they often start falling apart as their body gets shortchanged over the years. Look around you if you doubt this. The proof is all over. After high school and the sports mania, a lot of men get in good shape. But they make everything a contest or a game. And they get taught that emotions are for sissies. And sometimes don't even know if they want to make love or go play some sort of game. Well, there are dozens of ways that women and men get off the track. Some men, for example, are just friendly fondlers. And another type makes his love unions between a dozen other frantic pursuits. Mr. Average American gets so grooved into doing everything by the clock and only follows what is logical and acceptable or in some book that makes it very difficult. People with true sex drives and emotions will get cheated sexually by any one of these types, male or female. Yeah, men and women both in today's culture often get caught up in this work cult, a work mania that's so deep that everything else becomes secondary, including sex. And after years of being too tired and not having the time, well, many of these persons wake up in later years and wish they'd substituted a little more joy for the work. And by then, of course, it's just too late. Well, women, of course, have a few more problems that are peculiar to their sex and themselves, and many are afraid to let their stilted, immature mates know just how much they do like to make love. Well, don't want him thinking I'm a loose woman, these women think to themselves sometimes. Another problem is that so few men want to give affection. They've been taught to be a he-man and not show emotions. And lions and tigers and all other species can show affection, but sports coaches don't want their little game-playing machines to be human. They want machines. Too bad, women. Love is different than affection, of course. Love, as we mentioned, is based on appreciating your mate enough to set them free. And affection is getting the vibes going through body contact, mental stimulation. That's affection. Very different. By adding this affection to the sex act, you're going to bring in those wonderful joy vibrations or feelings. Women get caught up in the taboos of society and religions very early as a rule. The Bibles and mother and teachers never make sex clean, natural, and beautiful. Many who are indoctrinated with these mind blocks, realizing that they must simulate sex for security, will fool their husbands for many years. And some let their minds twist them into following causes or ideologies that eliminates healthy sex altogether. And then they become frustrated, overweight, and sometimes vicious if some miracle doesn't come along and save them. And women also have a harder time bringing on this wondrous vibe climax than men as a rule, and women need stimulation in 3 areas instead of just 1 like men. And the clitoris must be activated and kept stimulated along with the vagina. And third, the belly area must be heated by friction to get a complete energy release. And very few women ever get this complete orgasm. And of course, no lesbian relationship can bring on this total fulfillment and relaxation. Well, any woman who can find a man athletic enough and affectionate enough to bring on a true 3-way, totally fulfilling climax will have a gem. And such relationships will often thrive when there isn't any other things in common. The vibes are worth it. Well, on the other end of the scale, there are both men and women with bizarre and unhealthy or unnatural sex patterns that are out of the norm or unusual, and homosexuals and lesbians are typical examples. Very few of today's gays are true homosexuals, but there are a small percentage of persons with these and other unusual sexual differences. And this subject is covered elsewhere in depth, and we can only skim the surface of the subject of sex here. Well, drugs have sometimes been used in promoting sex stimulation or stimulation in general, but like all drugs, nature knows best. And after the body sends out defensive mechanism chemicals to counteract the various drugs, the effects often backfire. And sex then can be devoid of pleasure, and the body screams in pain if the drug isn't continued. Continue to kill the effect or the pain. And for your body's sake then, get your highs and keep your health naturally through listening to your body and following your emotions. Well, what we'd call sex persons, or persons who use and enjoy full sex relationships, are the truly blessed. They grow through life smiling and are alive and eager to greet each new wonderful day. They stand out from other people in a crowd because of this unseen energy vibrate. They radiate it. And people are attracted to this vibrate. And Hollywood, for example, is full of these sex persons who can project some of this energy over to a starved audience. And they usually keep their drives to themselves because the rest of the humanity is inwardly resentful of their inner joy. And these sex people don't need games, excuses, or legal bonds. All they usually need are mates who can share this wonderful gift with them, and someone who will put their entire emotions into lovemaking and bring on the incredibly powerful joy vibrations. Well, in a world of guilt and chaos, these persons are amused by the circus here. And they don't want drugged back down into the shallowness and negativity. They want to enjoy life as their Creator intended them to. At this point, let's turn to the mechanics of how we can exchange and use these energies. Now, since the invisible thought energies of the body are constantly being sent out to distant points or other people, it's very important that we send out the right thoughts. Now, closed-minded persons may set aside concepts of this energy transferal, but the eyes only pick up a tiny part of what's going on around us, and not to accept a little of this unseen world is just simply dumb. The human body sends out photon particles much like a radar system. This helps it to detect danger, gain information, for the so-called intuition. And in the blood are tiny crystals that can be activated into different shapes by the hormones and body chemicals. And these crystals are what reflect the energy outward. And the type of crystals determine the vibrational rates or types of energy sent. All a human must do is send out a strong signal with plenty of emotions to get amazing results back, and unfortunately many people are constantly in a negative mental mood and not only poison themselves but send out negative vibrations to others. Well, how often do your acquaintances come around with positive, cheery, uplifting moods? There are many persons today that dwell most of the time in misery and want to drag others down in the same despondent moods. Well, this might be fine if you love misery. And if you have such friends and don't like misery, help them back on the tramp, the right way or path, or dump them. You don't need any negative dragging you down. In a love relationship, if you hold a negative attitude towards your partner, the chances are good that sooner or later it'll poison your relationship and the wonderful love vibes will die. Well, think about the positive side of your partner in the situation. And be thankful for the good things. It'll help bring on even better things. Well, in today's hectic world, your mate may be under pressure. And it helps if you can reduce this stress and pressure. And don't be so tense and uptight around your mate. Get your thoughts off of your business or problems and on more relaxation and enjoyment. And this will relax and soothe your mate and family and let the vibes work correctly. Try to keep the environment positive and soothing. And if your mate has a hard day's work behind them, look decent, be positive, and keep the nest cheerful. You don't need any more tension or nerve twanging. Hard rock music and stimulating red colors are nerve twanging. Men are stimulated more visually than women usually, and if your man likes what he sees and advances, don't try to block him off. Respond and let yourself get swept into a positive dwell. Unfortunately, many women today have turned against their natural female instincts and let themselves get caught up in the work and responsibility and rat race. And instead of caring for the family and young, they've been tricked into being used for work production. And this is often economically necessary, but it's devastating to marriages. And if you'd like to see a perfect example of this, look at Russia. They got their women liberated. And in a very short time, they found that 1 in 3 of their marriages were failing. And the women stopped having children. So in 1980, they did an about-face, and they forbade their women to enter hundreds of male-oriented occupations. And as we keep pointing out, the priority mind is all too good at dehumanizing us and killing off our emotions. And it's enough that men are forced into such a strain on the body. Well, if you remember, not many years ago, only men generally wound up with ulcers. And today, women aren't far behind. For repressed, uptight males, women have long been a tonic and a relaxing influence. And if you're a man, you're a woman, you can hold your male and let him live longer if you don't go uptight on him, get caught up in all this male-oriented rat race. Well, one of the strange paradoxes of attraction attitudes is the fact that while women do not care so much how men look, they do care how a man acts and dresses. And while men may believe that their appearance isn't all that important, this is a mistake. Women have a constant drive to look attractive, and they don't get turned on by sloppy males. There have been several surveys that have shown that women are especially fond of flannel shirts and turtleneck sweaters and suits with vests. And even clothes don't help, though, if the male's not clean and confident in themselves. Well, a woman is given natural instinct to see and feel confidence, because only a confidence-positive male is suitable for raising her children. And men who project assurance and a little arrogance in their walk, talk, and stance will attract women, especially if they suddenly cut off this ice and warm up to the woman in conversation and attention. What women really want is a macho man who's tough and masculine, yet paradoxically they want him soft and emotional too at the same time. They want a man with feelings and compassion, a man who constantly remembers them in the little ways. Romance is the word that we could use here. Well, this desire for inner assurance and outer projection or style especially carries over in public. Women want men who can handle themselves in public and don't fall apart when the little crises situations pop up. Yet, they want a little impulsive fun now and then, and this is especially delightful to them. Any man that has his head screwed on straight then will find no problem with being attractive if he follows some of these simple directions. It's not really that difficult to stay neat and positive and a little attentive, with a little impulsive fun. Well, one of the mental traits of men that upsets many women is the fact that many men still aren't fair and won't allow them equality in matters of money and morals or family decision-making. Injustice kills relationships, and many men have never learned to grant their mates freedom. Well, loyalty comes high on these lists. Ridicule or critical behavior in public really wrecks a relationship fast. It's one thing to work out problems at home, and quite another to feel vulnerable as your mate lets you down in public. As we pointed out earlier, total honesty is very necessary in a relationship that's serious. And women usually know this instinctively, but they occasionally slip up when they use their feminine charms to get their way or reward. Men and women both sometimes tend to bend the truth a little. They think it'll save some hurt feelings. And either way, the mate should find out why they're not telling the truth. And they should find out why they got shortchanged from their mate if this happens. Because eventually total honesty will become refreshing, and it'll help hold you together. And since most persons live with many false fronts or facades, it may take a while to get total honesty out of your mate. And to get honesty, you must give honesty and set an example. And at first, you'll probably be a little used and abused. But hang in there, and eventually you should get to proper honesty in all your feedback. And this will give you a delightful relationship. Well, women who want to light up their man should realize by now that most of it starts in the head. And if you like what you see, get the thoughts of what you want in the relationship to turn toward going with a clean image and start following through with action. Tell the guy what you like about him. build up his ego and confidence. Men like to be told that they're doing a good job or that they look good. They'll go a long way in supporting a woman who appreciates them, gives them some good reason to make the rat race worthwhile. And it helps to show a little interest in his work and hobbies. You don't necessarily have to watch football with him if it turns you off, but you should defend and aid him in his interests. And this again is an extension of that all-important choice. We're all made different and shouldn't run into static or feedback if our tastes are not the same as our mates. And true affection requires some energy and vibe exchange. Look at your mate and send him some eye-to-eye emotions once in a while. It's great if you can go to where he is, away from home now and then, and really helps him to feel that you care. If you don't have total honesty in your relationship, it sometimes takes a while to learn to read your mate's nonverbal language. Typical silent periods can mean that they don't want bothered, or that from experience with a former mate, they get a sympathetic arm around them when they are silent, when they put on this attention-getting act. It's up to you as a man often to find out what all these strange actions are really about. This isn't easy. If you ignore them, they may get hurt. So probably be best to be honest. And after telling them that you love them, gently find out what the actions really represent. No reprimands, no deadly no's. Just use play it by the ear and gently feel and coax them into the truth. Well, money problems can be painful. So never tell a mate they should not have something or that it costs too much, because it might embarrass them. It's best just to say maybe and perhaps if their other conditions are met. Now this way you don't have to be evasive. You can be totally honest and still get your idea across. And wear the gifts you get if you're a man. Animals scent their territory, and women want their men wearing the clothes that mark their territory, that mark her territory in this case. Well, what men like in women may be different than many women may suspect. Well, lithe bodies and good figures are the first thing that gets men's attention, of course, but most males will pass up a pretty little spoiled prima donna if there's a thoughtful plain Jane that builds up their ego, makes a good companion. Frankly, men just hate crossness and irritability. And there's a lot of men around today that feel they may as well be single if they can't get consideration and peace. And men can buy their meals and sex very easily, and women can't. And it'd do well to keep this in mind before dumping good raw material. Well, think about it. Many single women are gypped and conned, and they're fair game for anyone from auto mechanics to lawyers. And there's a big difference in a woman alone and a man alone. And following a few rules to get and keep a good man are not much of a price to pay. And a lot of the rules come through just plain old common sense, like men that hate gossiping and selfishness. Well, showing a little common sense at shopping time is one thing, but men usually feel they work too hard as a rule to put up with women that squander their money. Self-control in all humans is very essential, and And there are very few persons that like to be around other people that can't control their habits, whether they're booze, smoking, gambling, or whatever. Well, unfortunately, with all the chaos and double talk today, there are very few men that actually know exactly what's expected of them and in society, and many are afraid of taking on the responsibility for guiding the family as nature intended originally. Because a man essentially is a family director, provider, and a masculine lover. And any roles that cut him off from such goals are contrary to the way nature had things set up originally. Well, things get mixed up today in the marketplace and in the rat race, where men must compete and sell to be successful. It's pretty easy to get tied up in this role and to back off and be human with a family. Well, let's touch again on the elusive sex power of some humans. We've pointed out before that the body can send enormous waves of energy to attract a person of the opposite sex. And in a like manner, the minds can play with a project, and they can throw out and project this kinetic energy. And virtually all the magnetic dynamic famous people have a greater output of sexual or mind-oriented energies. Well, the difference is that the mind-oriented energies border on hypnosis. They can often penetrate a person's normal walls and influence the thoughts and actions. And like hypnosis, these mind bombs can be sent in an ethical or an unethical manner. Now, used car salesmen use the energy unethically in many cases. World leaders and public performers usually use it to get their attention or positive energy returns. Well, if you honestly send thoughts of wishing to be close to a person and share experiences with them, it's usually only a matter of intense concentration to get the job done. If you see a potential mate, for example, or a love, you can quickly envelop them with your desire image. And this will get your mental image across. And as we keep pointing out, though, there's a fine line between granting choice and allowing the persons to choose whether they want to be with you and laying too heavy a hypnotic mind signal on them. And if you feel someone using these mind bomb vibes on you against your will, ask for confirmation and ask for a mental shield around your body to reflect this energy back to the sender. Unless, of course, you're in the mood to respond or investigate the source or play games with whoever doing it to you. But you'll know when your choice is being violated, and you'll know when you violate the choice of others. So watch it, be careful. Well, how we send the body energies is covered before, but let's look at it from a different angle here. For just as a camera image is materialized in billions of tiny little electrons of silver on the film, so too our mental images are put down in the soul's non-metallic or material recording tape. Now, your mind likes to think of this as a mechanical action, and in a way it is. And if the images are mentally projected, and very forcefully, they can become a reality in this material world of ours. Like the sensitized film, our reality can come from the rearrangement of these non-material and material atoms, which our thoughts and photon energies rearrange. Now, there are sometimes little aids to this concentration. Sometimes, for instance, it helps persons who have a low concentration ability go into a room that serves the same purpose as a photographic dark room without all the distractions and light. Some of them can easily relax and better build up our visions and desires. Well, the majority of desires and mental pictures which help humanity as well as ourselves will usually get through. And the soul will censor and process a lot of the other orders. Now, the more selfish things like a box of money to spend are often a waste of time to visualize because of the mind motivations that are involved. And if materialistic or selfish orders are put in, they can come through, but there's often a heavy restriction or a price to pay. And this catch, as we pointed out before, will often prevent the order from being fulfilled or warp the fulfillment. Your soul is sitting on the other side in the timeless dimension, and it can go into the future and it can see what many of these orders will bring. And you're here to learn lessons. And many orders just aren't filled for these reasons. Well, today here we are at the crossroads again. And we have the technology to create a paradise on this planet. And we can use our technology to be reborn and explore the many mansions of our Creator, or we can continue on playing selfish ego games with our lives and our mates. We've had lesson after lesson taught to us the hard way, and time after time the choice laws of light have been demonstrated to us. In the next few years, that light will either grow or it'll be put out and extinguished again. Now, on and on, many of us, though, have let our mind-centered ego keep us in a world of illusion and reflection. We humans just can't usually live and let live. We wind up destroying our world and all of our close relationships with others. And cycle after cycle, we wind up again, stop short, and having to struggle again slowly back to the point that our prior lessons got cut off. And many of us just never rise above the materialism and greed that keeps us isolated and alone and miserable. But now that you have the keys, or at least part of the keys, you can see for yourself what the goals are. The question is, what are you going to do? Path can be tread alone, or it can be tread with a companion part of the way. And the goal will only come through your own concentration and your own action. There were a number of the spiritual teachers of the world that have pointed out that the miracles they work could be performed by anyone. And the name of the game was in knowing self and putting this knowledge to work. Now, there are little bits and pieces of all of this knowledge all over the globe in the ancient works. And truth, though, has never been popular, and never will be popular. And in other presentations, the nuts and bolts of how to step up this human function is covered. And as we pointed out, you can't get the wattage and ability if we humans stay in a priority mind dwell any length of time. Has to be balanced. Unfortunately, there isn't any God that's dominating us and telling us what to do, because the lords and gods of 10,000 years ago were the gods of this planet, and they were jealous, vengeful gods that were a part of the domination system. Satan's banishment to earth is how the passages in the Bible put it. And as the Creator's perfection system was broken and the animal egg knowledge was warped, the reflection system took control of this planet's governing systems. And today, you and your soulmates and loves are now tied into this system, and it's entirely up to you whether you stay enslaved or break free. And this is one of the incredible inquiry features, which is designed to furnish the keys for your true choice. And this is Al Fry, and I hope you make your choices wisely.